In a world where the visible is all we see, there exists an invisible war, waged in the silence of our hearts and minds. It's a war not fought with swords or guns, but with thoughts, choices, and emotions. A battle between two opposing forces, forces that we often can't see but feel deeply. One is driven by light, hope, and purity, the other, by darkness, temptation, and fear. These forces, though unseen, shape the very course of our lives. They are the angels and demons of our existence, and whether we realize it or not, they are constantly influencing our fate. It is easy to dismiss such ideas as mere fantasy or religious metaphor. After all, how can we believe in angels and demons when our daily lives are governed by tangible things, jobs, relationships, bills to pay, and dreams to chase? Yet, every decision we make, every path we choose, every triumph and failure, speaks of something deeper at play. For within us, these two forces, angels and demons, are waging a war that has been fought since the beginning of time. And the outcome of this war? It is nothing less than the shaping of our destiny. Take a moment and reflect. Have you ever been torn between two decisions? Have you ever felt a nudge to do something good, only to feel an overwhelming urge to take the easier, more tempting path? Have you ever found yourself in a moment of moral conflict, struggling with what is right and what is easy? That moment, that internal tug of war, is where the battle between angels and demons is fought. But these battles are not always so obvious. They don't always take place in grand moments of choice, like deciding between honesty and deceit. Sometimes, they occur in the small, seemingly insignificant decisions we make each day. The way we speak to others, the actions we take when no one is watching, the inner voice that urges us to keep going when we feel like giving up. These are the moments where the angels and demons fight. The question is, how do we navigate this hidden war? How do we recognize the whispers of angels and the temptations of demons? And ultimately, how do we choose which side to stand on? And more importantly, what happens when we choose the wrong side? In the coming story, we will explore how this hidden war has shaped the lives of those who came before us and those who live among us today. From stories of legendary figures to ordinary people, the influence of angels and demons has been a constant, if often unnoticed, companion, and perhaps, by understanding this ancient struggle, we can better understand our own fate and the forces that shape it. Alex stared out the window, his fingers gently tapping the worn-out edge of the desk. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm golden hue across the office. But for Alex, the beauty of the evening didn't bring comfort. He felt a heaviness in his chest, a weight that he couldn't shake off. His mind was consumed by thoughts of the decision he had to make, the decision that would change everything. For months, Alex had been building his tech startup from the ground up. It had been a dream, a vision he had nurtured since his college days. His passion, his late-night coding sessions, and countless cups of coffee had brought him to the brink of success. But now, just as he was about to take the next big step, securing a lucrative investment that could propel his company to the top, he was faced with a moral dilemma. The investor, a billionaire venture capitalist, had a reputation. He was known for his ruthless business tactics, his willingness to do anything to maximize profits. Alex had researched the man thoroughly, and what he found didn't sit well with him. The billionaire had been involved in shady deals, using underhanded methods to push companies into submission, exploiting workers, and disregarding ethical standards in favor of wealth accumulation. And yet, the offer on the table was too good to ignore. The investment would give Alex the resources he needed to scale his business quickly, to hire the best talent, and to bring his product to market faster than he ever could on his own. It was a golden opportunity, one that many entrepreneurs would kill for. But as Alex sat there, staring at the offer letter in his hands, he felt a deep sense of unease. This wasn't just a business decision, it felt like a moral crossroads. The part of him that had built this company with integrity and passion knew that accepting the deal would compromise everything he had worked for. The values he had held dear, honesty, fairness, and respect for others, seemed at odds with the path the billionaire represented. In that moment, the battle began. On one side, there was a voice in Alex's mind, calm and convincing, telling him that this was the opportunity of a lifetime. Think about your future, it said. This is your chance to make it big, to build something that will last. You've worked so hard for this, and it's all within your reach. Don't let principles stand in the way of your success. Everyone compromises, at least a little. This is just the way the world works. It was the voice of the demon, the embodiment of temptation, self-interest, and the hunger for success at any cost. This voice, with its promise of wealth and recognition, was seductive. It appealed to Alex's fears, his doubts, and his insecurities. It made him question whether all the sacrifices he had made up until this point were worth it if he couldn't achieve his dreams on his terms. After all, wasn't success the ultimate goal? Wasn't that what mattered? But then, another voice stirred within him. It was softer, gentler, but unwavering. You've always believed in doing the right thing. It whispered, you've always wanted to build something that made a positive impact. Something that could change the world for the better. You know that money isn't everything. Integrity, honesty, and loyalty matter more than success that comes at the expense of others. Is this the kind of company you want to build? This was the voice of the angel, the voice of conscience, integrity, and the pursuit of goodness. Even when it was difficult, the angel didn't promise instant gratification or a shortcut to success. Instead, it spoke to Alex's deeper values, reminding him of the person he had always aspired to be. It was a call to rise above the temptation of easy wealth and to stay true to the vision he had for his company, a vision grounded in respect, fairness, and the desire to create something meaningful. The tug of war inside Alex's mind was intense. The demon's voice was loud, persistent, and alluring, convincing him that he was merely one decision away from realizing his dreams. But the angel's voice was steadfast, urging him to remember who he truly was and what he truly wanted to build. Alex's fingers tightened around the offer letter, his palms beginning to sweat. The decision weighed heavily on him. He had worked so hard to get here, and it felt as though everything hinged on this moment. It was as if the universe itself was watching, waiting for him to choose a side. Was he going to follow the path of ambition and self-interest? Or was he going to stand firm in his values, even if it meant sacrificing immediate success? In the silence of that moment, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the office grew darker, Alex knew one thing for certain: this was more than just a business decision. It was a test of character, and the answer wouldn't just affect his startup, it would shape the very person he became. Alex sat back in his chair, his eyes scanning the offer letter once more. The numbers on the page seemed to blur, growing larger and more overwhelming with every glance. This wasn't just an investment, it was a lifeline. His company, which had started as a small idea in a dorm room, was finally on the brink of becoming something bigger. He had come so far, sacrificed so much, but now, the price of success felt steep, far steeper than he had ever imagined. The billionaire's proposal was clear: a multi-million-dollar investment in exchange for a significant portion of the company's equity. On the surface, it seemed like a dream come true. Alex could expand faster than he had ever thought possible. He could bring on new team members, hire top-tier engineers, and create a product that would disrupt the industry. But something gnawed at him. Something didn't sit right. He had spoken to others in the industry, tried to gather as much information as possible about the billionaire behind the offer. It wasn't hard to find troubling stories. Rumors of underhanded business practices, exploitation, and a complete disregard for the well-being of employees were rampant. This man had built his empire on the backs of others, stepping over countless people to get to the top. And now, Alex stood on the edge of making the same kind of deal that had propelled this man to power. The demon's voice was growing louder. "It's just business," it said, with a sneer of indifference. "Everyone does it. You'll get what you need. And in the end, you'll be the one on top. Don't let some abstract notion of integrity hold you back. You can still do good things with all that money and power. What's the point of having values if they keep you poor and struggling?" Alex gritted his teeth. The voice was tempting, pulling him towards the easy way. The demon spoke with the language of success, of ambition. It promised him that his vision could still be realized, even if it meant bending the rules. Alex could already imagine the accolades, the media attention, the endless opportunities that would open up with the investment. The world would finally see him for what he truly was, a visionary, a winner. The struggle would be over. But then came the angel's voice, faint but resolute. "Do you want to be a part of something built on lies?" it asked. The question soft but piercing. "What will you have when the deal is done?" "Money, yes. But what else?" What will you have left when the applause fades and the truth catches up with you? Will you be proud of the empire you've built, or will it feel empty? Alex closed his eyes, the weight of the angel's words sinking in. The dream of success, true, material success, was seductive, but it had never been the only dream. There was more to life than just winning. It was about building something lasting, something meaningful, that didn't come at the expense of others. It was about leaving a legacy that wasn't just based on financial gain, but on values that transcended the pressures of the market. For a moment, Alex considered walking away. He could decline the offer and take his chances. The path would be harder, yes, but it would also be true to himself. He could find investors who shared his values, who believed in the vision of his company without resorting to manipulative tactics. But that would mean delaying the growth he had been dreaming of for so long. The fear of falling behind, of losing everything he had worked for, clawed at him. What if this was his one shot? What if turning down this offer meant failure? Could he really risk it all for the sake of principle? The demon's voice responded immediately. You're being naive. The world doesn't care about your values. It cares about results. And if you don't act fast, someone else will take that opportunity. Someone with fewer scruples. Someone who isn't afraid to do whatever it takes. Are you really willing to let this chance slip away? Are you really going to let some idealistic notion stop you from achieving your destiny? It was a powerful argument, one that made Alex's heart race. The fear of failure, of falling short, was one of the greatest demons he had ever faced. He had always prided himself on being a driven individual, someone who could push through any obstacle. But now, the obstacle wasn't something external, it was internal. It was a battle between the fear of failure and the fear of compromising his soul. The angel's voice grew stronger, steady and unwavering. What will you tell yourself years from now? What kind of man do you want to be? Do you want to be proud of the way you reached the top, knowing that you stayed true to yourself? Or will you live with the regret of compromising your principles? Every decision, no matter how small, shapes who you are, and this decision will shape the man you become. Alex's grip on the letter tightened, and he suddenly felt the full weight of the decision bearing down on him. It wasn't just a choice about business. It was about identity, about who he was and who he would become. Could he live with the consequences of choosing the path that would secure his success, but at the cost of his values? Or would he choose the harder road, the one that might not guarantee immediate success, but promised something deeper and more meaningful? In that moment, Alex understood that this wasn't just a business decision, it was a life-defining one. And no matter which way he chose, the consequences would follow him for the rest of his life. The hours ticked by slowly as Alex sat in the office, still holding the offer letter in his trembling hands. Outside, the world continued to move on, people bustling through their daily routines, unaware of the war being waged inside his mind. But Alex couldn't escape it. The decision he was facing was a war, a battle of wits, values, and ambition. The tug-of-war between the angel and the demon had only grown more intense. And now, it felt like time was running out. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. He needed clarity. He needed to understand what he truly wanted, not just for his company, but for his life. He had always dreamed of building something meaningful. But now, that dream was tainted by the allure of quick success, of wealth and recognition that seemed just within his grasp. The prospect of walking away from that was frightening. For years, Alex had struggled with the fear of failure, a fear that had driven him to work tirelessly, to push himself beyond his limits. He had spent countless nights perfecting his product, refining his pitch, and hustling to gain traction. Now, it seemed like his moment had finally arrived, but it was coming with a cost. The cost of his values, the cost of his integrity. The demon's voice whispered again, louder this time, pushing him towards the deal. This is your chance to make it. Everyone has to make compromises to get ahead. Think about what you could do with all that power. You could change the game. You could create something bigger than you ever imagined. No one will care about your principles once you've made it to the top. The world respects power, not purity. But the angel's voice wasn't silent. It countered the demon's words with an unwavering, steady rhythm. You don't have to lose yourself to win. The true measure of success is not in the wealth you accumulate, but in the people you uplift and the values you hold on to. Do you want to build something that lasts? Something that makes a real difference? Or will you sell your soul for temporary glory? Alex felt a cold sweat on his forehead as he opened his eyes. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in on him. It was as if the entire universe was waiting for him to make a decision, one that would shape not only his future, but the future of everyone involved with his company. His mind was a swirl of conflicting thoughts, and for the first time, he realized something important. This decision wasn't just about business. It was about who he was going to be. The demon's arguments were powerful. It wasn't just about money, it was about control, about power. The billionaire's investment would give him the leverage he needed to dominate the market, to take over his industry. With that kind of influence, he could bring his vision to life faster than ever before. He could become a household name, a force to be reckoned with. But at what cost? He had seen the price the billionaire had paid for his success: broken relationships, damaged reputations, and a life built on manipulation and exploitation. Alex closed his eyes again and took a deep breath. He had always believed that success didn't have to come at the expense of integrity. He had built his company from the ground up, and every step of the journey had been driven by his values. But now, those values were being tested in the most extreme way possible. Could he maintain his vision of doing good while still achieving greatness? Or was that just a pipe dream? For a long time, Alex had struggled with the idea of sacrifice. He had always told himself that he would never compromise his morals for success. He would build a company that not only thrived but also made a positive impact on the world. But the weight of reality was crushing. The world was full of people who had gotten ahead by making hard choices, by bending the rules when necessary. Was he naive to think that he could be different? In that moment, Alex realized something that he had never truly understood before. The true cost of success wasn't just in the price you paid, but in the price others paid. The billionaire's wealth hadn't come from thin air. It had come from the exploitation of others, from the manipulation of situations and people to his advantage. And now, Alex was being asked to join that system. The demon had promised him success, but the angel had reminded him of something even more important: the legacy he would leave behind. The people he would hurt, the values he would forsake, the kind of world he would create by making this deal. It all flashed before his eyes. The angel's voice was calm but firm, and it seemed to echo through his very soul. Do you want to be remembered for the money you made, or the good you did? The question lingered in the air, and Alex found himself standing, pacing the floor. His mind was racing, his entire future was at stake. And yet, in that moment of chaos, a strange sense of clarity began to wash over him. He realized that no amount of wealth, no amount of power, would ever be worth the cost of losing himself. He had come too far, fought too hard, to let this be the moment that defined him in a way he would regret for the rest of his life. It wasn't the deal that would define his success, it was how he chose to build it. It wasn't about bending to the will of the powerful, it was about standing firm in his values, even when the world around him seemed to encourage compromise. Success, he realized, was not just about winning at any cost, it was about winning in a way that stayed true to who you were. Alex stood there, in the quiet of his office, with the weight of the decision finally becoming clear. The war within him was still raging, but now, the path seemed clearer. It wasn't an easy path. It wouldn't be fast or simple, but it was his path, and it was one he could walk with his head held high. And with that realization, the decision was made. Alex sat still for a long moment, the silence of his office surrounding him like a thick fog. The decision, though still weighing heavily on his shoulders, had become clear. He could feel the weight of it, the magnitude of it. His life was about to change, but it wasn't going to change in the way he had once imagined. As he glanced down at the offer letter in his hands, he realized something important. This wasn't just about choosing between money and values, it was about defining who he would become. In that moment, Alex understood that success was not measured by the size of your bank account or the speed at which you rose to the top. It was about the kind of person you became along the way. He had spent so many years chasing the dream of building a successful company, but he had never truly understood the cost of that success, until now. He took a deep breath and stood up, walking to the window. The setting sun bathed the city in hues of orange and pink, a stark contrast to the storm swirling in his mind. His company had the potential to be something great. He had always dreamed of creating a business that wasn't just successful but one that made a positive impact on the world. But now, it felt as if that dream was slipping away. replaced by the stark reality of business politics, cutthroat decisions, and ruthless competition. The billionaire's offer had been tempting, a promise of quick success and instant recognition. But now, Alex realized it wasn't worth the price. The cost wasn't just the money, or even the control the investor would demand. It was the erosion of everything he had fought for. It was the betrayal of the values he had built his company on. The betrayal of the people who had believed in him, who had worked with him, and who had shared his vision. As he stared out the window, Alex could hear the angel's voice again, as if it were right beside him. "You know what's right," the angel said softly. "This is your chance to prove that integrity matters. This is your chance to show the world that you can succeed without compromising your values. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it." Alex knew it was true. The angel's words resonated deep within him, like a lifeline thrown to someone drowning. He had spent too many years of his life fighting to build something authentic, something with meaning, something that wasn't just a business, it was a movement for change, for transparency, for respect. How could he let all of that go for the sake of a deal that would have compromised everything he stood for? The demon, though, wasn't going to let him off that easily. It came again, sly and persuasive, as if it had been waiting for him to let his guard down. "You're overthinking it," the demon urged. "This is your chance to make it big. Everyone else does it. Alex, why not you? If you don't take the offer, someone else will, and they won't hesitate to do whatever it takes to win. You'll be left behind, forgotten." The words cut deep. Alex's mind raced again. Could he really pass up the opportunity of a lifetime? Was he willing to put his entire future on the line for the sake of something as abstract as integrity? What if he was wrong? What if this was the only chance he would ever get to make his dreams a reality? But as the demon's words lingered, Alex remembered something that had always stayed with him, the reason he started this company in the first place. It wasn't for the fame, it wasn't for the wealth, it was because he believed in the potential for change. He had always wanted to prove that a company could succeed without sacrificing its soul. He had built his product with that philosophy in mind, working tirelessly to ensure that it could benefit people, solve real problems, and bring something of value to the world. Was he willing to throw all of that away just because the road ahead seemed difficult? Was he willing to give up his vision for the sake of easy success? No, Alex made up his mind. The world needed businesses that cared about more than just profits. It needed companies that could be both successful and ethical. He wasn't going to be another one of those CEOs who made a quick fortune at the expense of everything they had believed in. As he set the offer letter aside, Alex realized that the path ahead wouldn't be easy. Turning down the investment would mean pushing back the launch of his product, delaying plans, and facing the uncertainty of finding alternative funding. But for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of peace. He wasn't chasing the dream anymore. He was living it. The following days were challenging. Alex had to face the harsh reality of what his decision meant. The rejection of the investment was met with disbelief from many around him. Some of his colleagues and partners questioned his judgment, and some even tried to persuade him to reconsider. The pressure was immense. Everyone around him seemed to believe that success in business was about getting ahead at any cost. And Alex was now the odd one out, the outlier. But as the weeks passed, Alex began to see the fruits of his decision. His refusal to compromise had attracted like-minded investors, people who believed in his vision and wanted to help build something lasting and meaningful. His company began to grow at a steady pace, and Alex's team remained loyal, motivated by the knowledge that they were building something true. His reputation within the industry started to gain respect, not because of the size of his company, but because of the integrity with which he ran it. The angel's voice had been right all along. Alex had chosen the harder path, the one that tested him every step of the way, but it was the path that allowed him to look himself in the mirror without shame. And in the end, it wasn't just about building a successful business, it was about building the right business, one that he could be proud of. Months had passed since Alex turned down the billionaire's offer, and though his decision had been met with skepticism and even mockery from some circles, he had never felt more confident in his path. He still faced immense challenges, funding remained tight, and the pressure to grow faster, to scale quickly, was ever present, but there was a quiet sense of pride within him now. The company was still small compared to its competitors, but Alex was no longer chasing the dream of being the biggest or the fastest. He was chasing something far more important, creating a business that was built on principles of honesty, integrity, and respect. The road had not been easy. Every day was a battle to stay afloat. There were times when he doubted himself, when the weight of responsibility seemed too heavy to bear. It wasn't just about running a company, it was about living out his values every single day. The pressure to compromise, to cut corners in the face of competition, was still there, but Alex had learned to trust himself. He had learned to see the bigger picture, to focus on the long-term success rather than the quick wins. And most importantly, he had learned that he didn't have to do it alone. Alex surrounded himself with like-minded individuals, people who shared his vision for a business that was about more than just profit. He had cultivated a team that was driven by purpose, not just paychecks. They were people who believed in the mission, who understood the importance of the company's values, and who were committed to building something that would last. And as he worked with them, side by side, he realized something crucial. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about a collective vision, a shared dream that was larger than any individual ambition. But even with his newfound resolve, Alex still faced moments of doubt. The industry was ruthless, and the temptation to make quick deals, to take shortcuts, was always lingering. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Alex sat alone in his office, staring at the numbers on his computer screen. His company was still growing, but the competition was fierce, and the demands of investors were beginning to weigh heavily on him. Some investors were starting to ask questions about his slower growth, about his insistence on maintaining the company's ethical standards. They wanted results, fast. And then, just when Alex thought the pressure might break him, he received an unexpected message. It was from a former colleague, one who had left the company years ago. This colleague had been a key part of the early team, someone who had believed in Alex's vision from the start. In the message, the colleague shared the news that they had just started their own company, one that was also built on values and ethics. But more importantly, they had successfully secured their first round of investment, not from the traditional sources, but from a group of ethical investors who were looking for companies that prioritized purpose over profits. The message was a turning point for Alex. He realized that he wasn't alone in his struggle. There were others out there, others who believed, just as he did, that it was possible to build a successful business without compromising on values. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but it was possible, and more investors, customers, and partners were starting to see the value in companies that cared about something more than just the bottom line. A few weeks later, Alex was invited to speak at a conference on ethical entrepreneurship. It was a small event, but it was attended by a community of like-minded individuals who were passionate about using business as a force for good. As Alex stood on stage, sharing his story, he felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. He had struggled, he had faced countless obstacles, but he had made it, and the journey had only just begun. The feedback from the event was overwhelmingly positive. Many attendees approached him afterward, sharing their own stories and thanking him for being a role model. For the first time in a long time, Alex felt a sense of validation that was not based on the size of his company or the amount of money in the bank. It was based on something much deeper, the impact he was making on the world and the values he was instilling in his business. As his reputation began to grow, so did his company. The ethical investors who had been skeptical at first now saw the value in Alex's approach. They began to provide the funding he needed to grow, but on their terms. They understood that success didn't always come quickly, and they respected Alex's commitment to building a company that would stand the test of time. They were willing to invest in something that was built to last, not something that would collapse under the weight of unethical practices. But even as his company grew, Alex never lost sight of what had gotten him here in the first place. He was still driven by the same values that had guided him from the beginning. Every decision he made was still filtered through the lens of integrity. It wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. One afternoon, as Alex was walking through the office, he overheard a conversation between two employees. They were talking about how proud they were to work for a company that didn't just care about profits, but cared about people. They spoke about the company's commitment to transparency, to fair wages, to sustainability, and as Alex listened, he realized something that made all the sacrifices, all the challenges, worthwhile. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about creating something that would continue to make a positive impact for years to come. That was the true reward. The years went by, and Alex's company continued to grow, not in the explosive, unsustainable way that so many other tech companies did, but in a way that felt deliberate and meaningful. His brand had become synonymous with authenticity, integrity, and purpose. People who worked with him, or even interacted with his business, spoke not just of his product but of his values. And that was more valuable to Alex than any dollar amount he could put in his bank account. But as his success grew, so did the challenges. The world of business was still as competitive and cutthroat as ever. And with every milestone Alex achieved, there seemed to be even more obstacles in his path. The pressure to scale, to grow faster, to meet the expectations of investors, was never ending. The financial pressures were real, but they weren't the most difficult part. The most difficult part was knowing that he had set out on a path that wasn't easy. One that demanded sacrifices and constant vigilance to stay true to his principles. One evening, Alex sat at his desk in his office, now located in a sleek skyscraper in the heart of the city. His team had just finished a major presentation to a new group of investors who were willing to commit significant funding. But with strings attached, the terms were harsh, demanding more control and influence over the direction of the company than Alex was comfortable with. It was an offer that would catapult his business into the global spotlight. But it came with a cost. The cost of his autonomy. The cost of his values. He knew the question had come again, the question he had faced so many times before. Was it worth it? Was the promise of wealth, power, and influence enough to compromise everything he had worked for? The temptation to take the money, to make his company a household name, was immense, but Alex had been down that road before. He had learned the hard way that success that came at the expense of his integrity was not worth having. Not then, and not now. As the hours passed, Alex sat deep in thought, his mind running through all the possibilities. He had come so far, and he had achieved so much, but there was a deep unease in his chest, a voice telling him that he hadn't fought this hard, had built this company with such purpose, only to let it be controlled by forces that didn't share his vision. His company wasn't just a business to him, it was a mission, a reflection of his core beliefs. To sacrifice that for money would be a betrayal, not just of his vision, but of the people who had helped him get here. Suddenly, his phone buzzed on the desk. It was a message from his mentor, a former business partner who had been a guiding light throughout his journey. The message was short, but it hit home. Success isn't defined by how much you gain, but by what you're willing to lose in order to preserve what matters most. Alex smiled softly as he read the words. His mentor had always been the voice of reason, the one who had taught him to be true to himself, even when the world tried to pull him in a different direction. It was a reminder that he had never been alone in this journey. And more importantly, it was a reminder of why he had started this company in the first place, to make a difference. To leave a legacy, not just to create wealth. Alex took a deep breath and stood up from his desk. The decision, once again, was clear. He couldn't sell his soul for success. He wouldn't compromise the vision that had driven him for so long. The offer on the table, though tempting, was just another shortcut, another illusion of success. Real success wasn't about getting ahead by any means necessary. It was about building something that stood the test of time, something that was rooted in principles that could guide it through the toughest of times. The next morning, Alex called a meeting with his senior leadership team. He explained the offer and the situation in full detail, as he always did, honestly, transparently, and with respect. There was no hesitation in his voice as he told them his decision. They would turn down the investment. He would not allow their company to be hijacked by outside interests that didn't share their values. It was a difficult choice, and the room was filled with a mix of admiration and concern. "Are you sure?" one of his colleagues asked, looking at him with a mixture of disbelief and respect. "I'm sure," Alex replied, his voice steady. "This is our company. We built it with our values. We don't sell those values for a quick payoff. We keep going. The right partners, the right investors, they'll come. We just have to stay true to what we believe in." The team agreed, though some were uncertain. It wasn't an easy decision. They were turning down financial security in exchange for the uncertainty of continuing on their own terms. But as the days passed and word of Alex's decision spread, the company found a new wave of support. Investors who valued long-term growth, sustainability, and ethical practices began reaching out. Customers, too, began showing more loyalty, drawn to the authenticity of the brand. The years that followed were marked by steady growth, though it was never as fast as some of the other companies that had taken shortcuts. But Alex didn't mind. He knew that the journey was far more important than the destination. And in the end, the company grew to be one of the most respected brands in its industry, not because it was the biggest or the richest, but because it had remained true to its values. Alex had built something that mattered. And as he stood on stage at an awards ceremony years later, receiving an accolade not for the size of his company, but for the impact it had made on the world, Alex realized something profound. He had not only built a successful business, he had built a legacy. A legacy that would inspire others to choose integrity over short-term gain, to value purpose over profit, and to always remember that the true measure of success was not in what you achieved, but in how you achieved it. As the applause rang out and Alex looked out over the crowd, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace. He had made the right choice. The battle had been long, and the road had been hard, but in the end, he knew that he had built something that would endure, and that was worth more than any amount of money or recognition.